Now, something came up the other day, actually a few months ago, quite a few months ago, and it's something that needs to be discussed. And it's about, jiu-jitsu and injuries and how the body can keep up with the mind. Because as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, you really want to be able to go as hard and as far as you can, but with the limit of the human body, okay? Because our minds can obviously go past what the human body is able to, but what the struggle part is our bodies get wear and tear and can only endure so much. So what I want to do is I want to watch a video that was posted a few months ago and just talks about some of the struggles and hurdles that comes with training jiu-jitsu. And I'd like to respond to them and give you guys some insights of what he's talking about and kind of dial in about what we can do to prevent these things and actually have a future forward to training jiu-jitsu. So let's get this going and how it worked. Let's do it. Oop, there we go.
My body is forever damaged from training jiu-jitsu. I started training 10 years ago. I'm a purple belt. If you know anything about jiu-jitsu, the belt ranking system is white, blue, purple, brown, black for adults. And then they have belts beyond black, but your last name pretty much has to be Gracie if you want a red belt or a red and white belt. I originally got curious about jiu-jitsu, probably like many people do, through the Joe Rogan podcast.
What's the practical use of jiu-jitsu?
Well, if you and I were in a fight, that would kill you.
He used to talk about it a bunch, and I listened, and that kind of planted that first seed for me. I was 27 or 28 when I first started. It was right around the time when I started working at the Spearmint Rhino, and I was parking cars there. I wasn't dancing. I remember I was doing P90X, and one of the guys that worked there was a boxer, like legit.
I want
boxer.
you guys to remember this.
I
want you to remember what he just said there with P90X.
He saw me eating clean. I had my little lunch packed. I was the new guy, the new valet attendant outside, and everybody likes to bust your balls.
Are you breaking my butt?
Kind of looks like Johnny Sins.
I remember him calling me a pretty boy, saying like, why are you trying to get in shape? You trying to get a six-pack? He's like, do you know how to fight? And I'm like, yeah, I know how to fight. I felt like I did know how to fight a little bit. When I was much younger, like 15 years old, I trained in boxing for a summer, hitting mitts and the bags and sparring a little bit. So I felt like I could handle myself. And I grew up fighting, the typical, oh yeah, man, I've got plenty of street fights under my belt response that I gave him.
He hit the coach and said he had like 200 street fights and like he's gonna a lot of guys up. And
That's Strickland in there.
And he kind of chuckled and he was like, you should come down to the boxing gym sometime. And I did. And I showed up at his boxing gym. I remember my first day training with him. He kind of like Mr. Miyagi'd me and he was having me do stuff that wasn't really boxing. He's telling me that a lot of it would play into it. Things like hitting a tire with a sledgehammer, but not just hitting the tire with a sledgehammer, but turning your hips in the way that you would when you're throwing a punch as you're hitting the tire with the sledgehammer to help you get power.
The energy travels up the leg, twists through the hips, and into the large muscles of the back, chest, and shoulders.
Sorry, getting into the weeds of things, but he Mr. Miyagi'd me a bit, and I trained with him for, gosh, I think it was like nearly 9 to 10 months. I was 28 years old. I was in the best shape of my life. Cardio was insane, and I felt like hot shit. How could I not? Then my buddy Paco came over to my house, and at the time, he had been training jiu-jitsu. He was a one-stripe white belt, for people who don't understand jiu-jitsu ranks. He was basically training for like 3 to 6 months at that point, and he was fairly consistent, but a lot of times you'll hear people joke around saying like your first stripe means that you learned how to tie your belt. He was about 135 pounds and 5'6".
So we'll hit a stopping point right there, all right? And everything he said is true so far. One thing I want to mention is that his experience about meeting someone at the gym, teaching him some Mr. Miyagi stuff, that's all over the place, okay? That's where people get misled about, let me show you the way of the Tai Chi, and the Zen. And it's like, no, there's no mysterious power. Now there's movement. I can do movement that, with an opposite reaction, there's a reaction to it or whatever. But when his friend came, and this is where I would like to make a pivotal point here, is that when he said that, he had his first strike, when you start training 3 to 6 months, surprisingly, you know more than about 90% of the world when it comes to self-defense. And that's amazing. 3 to 6 months of 2 to 3 times a week at the gym. I wish every police officer did that. You know what I mean? So anyway, he is correct though.
He's not a big guy. And I, at the time, was 185 pounds and 6'1", which gave me a bit of a size advantage on him. And there at my house, in front of my soon-to-be wife,
surprisingly long,
Paco
lanky
chokes
people.
me out multiple times on my living room floor. That's when I was just like, oh man, I have no idea how to fight. If it was a boxing match, I'm pretty sure I would have won.
So 2 things. Again, I just wanted to mention that he just proved my point right there, you guys. That guy just choked him out 3 to 6 times within 3 to 6 months of training. That just shows you right there, just from an average. So just imagine someone that's a purple belt. Think what kind of damage they could do, let alone a black belt. Sorry, let's continue.
Because I was training boxing at that point, but I've never grappled in my life. I didn't grow up wrestling. I never trained judo. I never did any of that stuff. And jiu-jitsu was just something that I had heard Joe Rogan talk about a lot on his podcast. So I thought it was pretty cool that Paco was training it, but I wanted to put it to the test. And I quickly found out that, that stuff works. And Paco choked me out a bunch of times in front of my wife. I'm glad that she still decided to marry me after watching me get choked out by my tiny friend. But that's when I decided I'm going to do it. The funny thing is, on the way to my boxing gym, I would drive by this sign that said jiu-jitsu. Every single day I went to the gym. And mind you, I was going to the gym like 5 times a week to train boxing, and just seeing that jiu-jitsu sign, knowing nothing about it more than just what I've heard from Joe Rogan and from what my buddy Paco was telling me. I didn't research it much, which is strange for me because I am the type of person who researches everything, and then I get caught up procrastinating and in that weird. I've done a lot of research on this topic, so much so that I feel like I don't even want to do it anymore, and I do that with a lot of things, but I didn't do that with jiu-jitsu. I was just genuinely curious and thought that the best way to learn more about it was to try it and not research it too much. Because you end up watching fight videos and jiu-jitsu street fights, and then you go down a rabbit hole, and pretty soon you're seeing some old fat Russian guy doing sistema, throwing people across the room by just touching them on their...
Now, he does have a point there, all right? And this is where the research does come in. And also, when he was talking about not doing research, it is important. Find someone that you like and you can contribute to. And, of course, when you see different gyms, there could be Alliance, it could be Atos, it could be Gracie Baja. There's so many. You just need to start, going in. And remember, they will offer you a free class if you guys are looking for. So to his, to other people's surprise, you think that you have to go on that one and stick with that one. No, try it out. Go see what else is out there and see if it works for you,
Obviously bullshit. So I finally decided to stop at that jiu-jitsu gym. And I remember the first time training and getting beat up by young children. There was a kid there. He was a green belt, which is like the highest rank you can get when you're under 16 years old. And the kid was legit just insanely good. And he was like 13 or 14 years old. He manhandled me. A couple of the blue belt girls that were there kicked my ass. I remember coming out of that class so exhausted and feeling like I had to throw up because my cardio was put to the ultimate test. Mind you, at this point, I thought my cardio was the best it has ever been. But it wasn't grappling cardio. It's different. When you're grappling, when you're doing jiu-jitsu, when you're wrestling, it uses your entire body, and it uses parts of your body that aren't used unless you're really grappling or doing exercises to improve those strengths that are around grappling.
Now, he has a good point, and this happens so often. About 5 or 10 years before I started doing jiu-jitsu. Actually, you know what? It was probably about 5 years ago, correct. P90X came out, and that was the big fad. And instead of me doing that, because I ran a lot, I actually got into jiu-jitsu. And I would see these guys, these CrossFitters, these P90Xers, they would come in, have the great cardio that they thought they had all this, I can do this, I could accomplish this within 30 to 60 seconds. The breathing, the exhaustion, the muscle tensing up, because it's a different type of physical form, and that's where a lot of injuries can happen, which we will get into. But I wanted to preface this with a lot of people that have that high intensity style training, and they're not able to relax. So that's why when we get into this, when you lift weights versus when you do like a CrossFit or a high intensity, like a HIIT workout, when you're lifting weights, there's actually some calm within the intensity, right? You want you want your form to be right when you're lifting, whereas when you're doing a HIIT workout, form is obviously important, but you can get away with it with movement. So you see those kipping pull-ups, right? But they're not actually form pull-ups, and so that is where I believe the cardio gets missed with jiu-jitsu, because there's so much tension as you're grappling and holding, but there's also a sense of direction where you're moving your pieces and puzzles with the other opponent and their body parts. So what I'm getting to is that there's a finite amount of movement and strength that you need to be able to level, and a lot of people can't cognitively put that into practice or place, and it's just all or nothing or not, and that's where the injuries happen. And so like I'm a big advocate of kind of like chilling and having some like fun flow rolls, because I think that's where you're going to get the best out of both people, and you're not going to have these spastastic moments, and that's where you get a lot of that white and blue belt spazzy moments, because they're not really in their body, they're in their head, and they're just making these knee-jerk reactions, where when you start learning this, like he was saying, that one stripe white belt, you'll be surprised that his fluidity is going to be better than someone that's brand new. And the more and more you do it, just like with someone practicing, like an instrument or, a skill that they do very well, it just becomes natural to them. They're not using a lot of strength, or they're not using a lot of, mindset to it. And before you know it, they become a master, and it just becomes easy for them. So that's something to be prefaced when we continue
I was hooked.
This.
At that point, I stopped going to the boxing gym. I signed up for the jiu-jitsu gym, and I was obsessed. It became a thing that I did every single day, sometimes twice a day. Mind you, at this time, I had a job that was super chill. I worked graveyard, and I only worked like 3 or 4 days a week and made decent money. And then I had my mornings and afternoons pretty much completely open. I had no kids, no real responsibilities. So I had plenty of time to train. And
that's something that we'll get into as well. When you have that time, because it is addicting, there's just something about being able to manhandle somebody else. And with that, you start picking up these cool movements, and then it works. And because that's the thing, when you have these, martial arts like Aikido or Taekwondo, they have a great self-defense aspect to it. But again, to his point, that or to a point where, the person has to move in a specific way. Where in this one, you can really manipulate them in the way that you want. And it just becomes addicting, where you can just be like, oh, I can move this here, and we just have free range, and there's really no there is a structure, but you can make it your own. It really becomes something that the brain really wants to do more and more and more. So I totally understand where he's coming from, as I was in that situation as well.
And I quickly advanced. I went from a white belt to a blue belt in about 13 months, which the average blue belt takes about 2 years or so to get. So I definitely got my blue belt quick by most standards.
That is correct.
I competed about 3 or 4 times as a white belt. Might have competed almost 5 times. I don't remember. I got first place in my first tournament at Naga, no-gi. I felt great. It was awesome. I was never an athlete. This is the first time I got a medal put around my neck. I stood on a podium, and I beat people fair and square with my ability. And it felt awesome. And I kept going, and I didn't stop until my first serious injury at blue belt. When I got my blue belt, I was hesitant to compete right away, because I felt that I wasn't ready. I felt that I needed to build up a little bit more to be prepared for that first blue belt tournament. I really hyped myself up, and I waited, and I kept training, and I trained hard. And it was about 4 or 5 months where Masters Worlds was coming up in Vegas. And Masters is the older guys. Younger guys are adults, and then they have kids in tournaments for jiu-jitsu. And then you have Masters 1, 2, 3, 4. So Masters World is like this big tournament for all the old guys. And that was my first blue belt tournament. And I got absolutely demolished.
That's true.
Wrecked. I remember someone telling me that they overheard that guy had already been training for a bunch of time, and he was a blue belt for like 4 years. And
That's
I was
called
a blue belt
sandbagging.
for 4 months.
That's
I get
called
destroyed.
sandbagging.
And not only does my ego get hurt, but I hurt my knee. And this is one of the first times that I experienced a serious injury. I didn't have insurance at the time, so I didn't go and get an MRI, because it was just going to be too much money for me to pay for that. I decided to still go to the doctor, and they gave me a rough idea of what they thought was wrong with it. And it seemed like a light MCL tear. When I would walk, it felt like my knee was giving out. I couldn't walk walk or jog for a while. So,
all right, let's just hold it off right there really quick. Now, this does happen. And I'd like to just say one thing, and we will start going into what to do, how to prevent. I know it's, we're already halfway through this, but so first thing, one, when you start getting addicted to this, when you start, stay in the gym, all right? Stay in the gym. If you want to compete, do it locally. Locally is the best place to start. When you start going to like IBJJF, you start doing these sub-hunt pros, you get, you do these high promotions. Well, the higher status people are going to play. Now, it's okay to challenge yourself, but the more risk you're going to have, obviously there's more reward, but there's also a downside to that. And one of the biggest downside, obviously, is injury. Now, to his point, when you're training that often and then you go put yourself into a fight or flight mode, your senses all go out of the door. Your adrenaline's up, you're not really thinking properly, and you're not making the best decisions. But that being said, yeah, the knee and the ankle are the first to go, between the shoulder and the elbow. There's just so many. But this is because it's just a high intensity, just kind of like, like hit. And this is where I'm getting at here earlier, is when you're doing like a hit workout, right? And you're throwing these movements out and you start getting tired, right? You're exhausting your body to like your hypertrophy of your muscles are dwindling because there's just so much of it. Well, your tendons aren't protected by that muscle anymore because of you actually exhausting them so much. So once you have that adrenaline dump, I call it, you're really risking yourself and prone to injury. And that's why you find that more often in high intensity training, like competition training and or actual competition itself. And this is where you have to have preventative maintenance. And to give you some of the preventative maintenance off the bat is definitely having a regimen of lifting weights and doing mobility exercises. And that mobility needs to be within the jiu-jitsu realm. So if you have some certain stretches or moves that you like to do, put those bands and put those resistant weights on, so that way when you're in that motion, you are actually putting a little weight to it, so that way you're not doing something that's not really attributing to your you're not really attributing to the flexibility of just your own muscle, but the way you would in that position. So if you're like in a Kimura position, hey, the best things you can do is putting your elbow behind your head, right? And doing these kinds of stretches back and forth in those both ways. And those kinds of stretches and using weights as well are going to help you. But what he did wrong, in my opinion, which I did myself, I did not lift and I didn't do mobility enough to support what I needed to do. I was more of a runner, which I think helped me out with my legs a little bit and my cardio, but my ligaments were not, and that's where I really struggled with. And to his point, I had
this was my first
I have a meniscus tear,
and
I had
during
to get
the time
surgery
I was
on
recovering, my gym kind of had a falling out, and it fell apart. The black belts that taught most of the classes went and started their own gym, and through the middle of all that, I was trying to get back into training. At the time, Gymnanigains had been teaching at Syndicate MMA, which was not too far from my house. It was about a 15-minute drive, and I decided that I wanted to go train with him. He's ADCC champion, super well-known jiu-jitsu practitioner, legit world champ jiu-jitsu guy. He was also at like the peak of his MMA career at that point. So I thought it'd be cool to go train with him, and I did. I think I trained with him for 9 months or so. But again, as it goes with fight gyms, there was drama at Syndicate MMA, and Vinny decided to split off, and he was kind of in between gyms. So a lot of the people that trained with him started following him around, and I was one of those. He was at the small karate gym at one point, then he moved to like this boxing gym that had some mats. We were just kind of gypsying around to find places to train when we were training with Vinny, which was kind of cool because there was like less than 10 of us getting instruction from one of the best jiu-jitsu guys at the time. Got to roll with him, and I got to train with him, and he was a good coach. He had a lot going on with his fight career, so sometimes he wouldn't be there and his black belts would teach or some of the other students would teach. But overall, learning with him was a good experience. And then around that time, the first baby came around. I remember being at jiu-jitsu when my wife went into labor. She calls me and she's like, I'm in labor. And everyone tells you that, oh, when you think you're going into labor, you're really not. And it's like a lot of false alarms. And I was like, okay, no worries. hours, I'll be home. I left class and I went home, but I always like to shower after jiu-jitsu. Mats can be dirty sometimes, especially at MMA gyms. For some reason, MMA guys aren't as clean on the mats as jiu-jitsu guys are, and there tends to be more shit that goes around, like ringworm and staph infections and skin diseases. So I always showered after I got out of jiu-jitsu, and I had to shower before I took my wife to the hospital when she was going into labor, and there's still a joke that her and I say, because I have this weird obsession that
okay, write down, jiu-jitsu need to be clean. Okay,
it wasn't a top priority anymore, but it was something I always wanted to go back to because I really enjoyed doing it. After my firstborn got a little older, I was able to go back to the gym, and then we ended up having a second baby, so then I took time off, and then eventually went back to the gym, and that same cycle of like gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, leaving jiu-jitsu, going back to jiu-jitsu, and that like just kept happening. But I kept training. I never really completely stopped training, but I hurt more, and I wasn't young anymore. And when we moved out of Vegas and came to Washington, got back into the gym, I got back into training, and I was feeling good. And then COVID happened and everything shut down. My gym in particular here in Washington shut down. When they reopened, it shut down again like a month later, and I kind of just said, I'm taking a break for a while. At this point, I had good health insurance, and after about a year off of jiu-jitsu, I finally decided to get my knee surgery. And the surgery kicked my ass. I had a bucket tear in my meniscus. It didn't have anything to do with my MCL that I had hurt years before. That seemed to have healed up pretty well on its own, but the bucket tear on my meniscus was a problem that I just constantly had, and it showed up a lot in jiu-jitsu. I remember very early on when I was a white belt, we were drilling triangle chokes and my knee got jammed, and I had to kind of like move it around so that it would unstick itself. It sucked, and then that would happen frequently. I would say often, maybe not frequently, but sometimes it would happen and I'm able to like adjust my knee and it would feel okay, and then sometimes it would just get completely stuck and I would have to extend it and then like grit through the pain. I remember that happened a couple times. In those cases, I'd be in pain for like a week, 2 weeks, and just kind of like this lingering achy pain in my knee. Finally, I decided to get that fixed because I had taken a bunch of time off, and it just seemed like a good time to do it, given the fact that COVID was still happening, and we were kind of in a weird spot because we had moved up to where my brother-in-law.
Now, he brings up a good point. We'll hold off right there. Now, similar situation happened with me during COVID. I had a meniscus tear about, 3 or 4 years prior, but I did my best to do rehabilitation. I did my best to do exercises to elongate that injury because I'm not very prone to surgery. When I say prone, I don't really like to have to do it if I don't, because sometimes surgeries can make it worse, just depending on who's doing it, where it is, and where it's at, just all sorts of things. And I'm all about doing recovery work as much as possible. One thing, though, to his point, is when he had that meniscus surgery, as what I did, which is interesting because I see him having a brace on. So I don't know if he had a tear or a brace, but what's interesting is like when I had mine done, I didn't have a brace. My doctor gave me like one of those little inflammation wraps and was like, dude, you be walking the same day. When we get out, you better be walking. Anyway, my point is, and I want you guys to think about this if you're watching this whole long thing, you have to do your due diligence to make sure you know when it's enough, because when we do something that we love to do, right, it's addicting. What do? We do a little bit more, and then we do a little bit more, and then we do a little bit more, and that's the problem with the jiu-jitsu addiction. And I know it's real, and it happens in weightlifting, workout. It's just awesome when you see results. It is great. It's probably the best addiction ever than anything else, right? Seeing results and actually improving your life versus the other addictions that screw them up. But when he had his knee done, the biggest thing that you can do, the biggest problem that you can do is once you have a surgery, you stop. And that's the biggest thing that you can't do. Now, for me, and some advice for you guys, if you have a major surgery or something that's coming up, when you have it, that time that you would go to that gym, still go and just sit there, even if it's for a half an hour. Because you would have gone anyway, but you're there looking and watching and seeing. Now, with my leg having a problem with it, my upper body was still fine. I could still lift weights on my upper body and all that, my left leg. But also, with my meniscus, I was able to stretch it out. and move my leg. Probably overdid it just a little bit, but the doctor was cool. You know, he was like, hey, I'm glad you're pushing it instead of not. But that being said, if you are in that situation and you just sit back and enjoy it, that's where you're going to start having a problem. So if I could dissect where we're at right now, he started, got really interested into it, just trained a bunch. That's totally cool. And then when he got to a point where he was going a little too hard with the competitions, that's where I would bring it back a little bit, or just stick to 2 to 3 days a week. If you have kids, I totally understand. Make it once a week. The thing that you guys have to think about that this is where the most important part of the video is, you need to give yourself time to recoup and to heal. And it is so fun going in there, but the more damage we do, and that's something that I have just been so proud about, is I've had one major injury that set me back 6 months, and I just lucked out because it was during COVID. So it really wasn't, if in fact it made me better because I was able to rest, I worked out, my leg's done, and it was the best surgery I've ever had in my entire life. Like, I'm actually better now that I did that. I did my research on the doctor. I did the time that I needed to. I took time off. I almost took like 8 months off before I actually went in. And when I went in, I took another 3 months of just light rolls. There was no heavy. And my point is, you need to give yourself that longevity. You need to give yourself that time to recoup and actually focus on yourself versus what that sport's giving you. And that could be actually degrading your body.
House was, and there wasn't really any jiu-jitsu gyms nearby, and I just decided, like, it's okay, I'll take a break and I'll come back to it. Fast forward a year and a half later, and I'm traveling Europe, and I decide that now is probably a good time to start training jiu-jitsu again, which is ridiculous because if you train jiu-jitsu and you know what it's like to go visit gyms, it's a crapshoot sometimes. And you can sometimes go to a gym where everybody is super cool and welcoming and inviting. And sometimes you can go to a gym where they see you and you're like fresh meat. You can imagine me, overweight, a little out of shape, coming in with a brand new gi and a brand new purple belt that I bought while I was traveling because I didn't originally pack this stuff with me on my trip to Europe, showing up at a small, grimy, hot gym in Spain, in Malaga. Luckily for me, I speak Spanish, so I was able to at least communicate with the people there, kind of tell them, hey, you know, we're traveling, I haven't trained in a few years, I had knee surgery, I'm out of shape, and I'm pretty sure most of the people there probably did not think I was a legit purple belt. And I consider myself a legit purple belt. I earned my purple belt. This was not given to me. I got my purple belt from a Ricardo Cavalcanti black belt, who is a Carlson Gracie black belt. And I have legit lineage behind my blue and purple belt. So I consider myself a good purple belt. I know what I'm doing, but when you're fat and out of shape and haven't trained in 2 years, your purple belt doesn't mean shit. And you're pretty much like a really good white belt or a mediocre blue belt.
I don't know if I agree with that.
And it takes a little while to get back into shape of grappling. But I decided to start training again while I was traveling. And I continued to train during our travels. I trained in Barcelona. I trained in Portugal. Unfortunately, didn't train in London, and I really wanted to go to Carlson Gracie London, but I was too far, and it just didn't work out. But I trained throughout my travels, and when we settled down in Portugal for like that month and a half before we came back to the U.S., I was back at it like 2-3 times a week. I got my kids in it, which is something I've always wanted to do, and I was back. And now, fast forward like 6 months, here I am back in the US, feeling great. I've been training since I've got back. Pretty much one of the first things I did when we got back from our trip was go right back to my old gym and sign up. And that was about 4 or 5 months ago. It's the most consistent I have been since pre-COVID, I would say. And I'm beat, man. I'm gonna be 39 years old in a few months. At this point, my knees hurt all the time. Neck pain, which I ended up getting x-rayed at one point, and I had some degeneration in a couple discs in my neck. My back hurts, broken, dislocated fingers and toes. My fingers hurt because I train a lot of gi. There's a lot of grip breaking, very similar to judo. You're grabbing collars, you're grabbing sleeves, and it's very bad on your fingers. A lot of old school jiu-jitsu guys who trained a lot of gi have arthritis in their fingers. My elbows are screwed up from being armbarred too many times. One more injury that I forgot about was my chest. I was born with a birth defect where I have kind of a concave chest. And one time when I was training with a much bigger guy who's was probably closer to 300 pounds, and he's a black belt now, but at the time I think he was a brown belt. And I was just about to get my purple belt at that time, but we were training takedowns, and I don't remember the exact toss that he caught me with, but it was some kind of judo throw, hip toss, and he landed on me in side control. But when I landed, I was kind of on my side like that, and he kind of landed on me, which caused my chest and my sternum to go like that, and I felt it like right down the crack, the parts of your ribs that connect. And it was the worst pain I had ever felt in my life. And to this day, this happened years ago, I can't sleep on my side. My wife makes fun of me because I sleep like Dracula.
That's how I sleep.
Like this straight, because if I don't sleep straight, I wake up with a hurt neck or a hurt back or a hurt chest. Because if I sleep in the fetal position or on my side, I mean, it is such an excruciating pain that it wakes me up. And then I get up and I have to like stretch, and it hurts. And I've gone to the doctor for it. It's been x-rayed. It's cartilage damage from what they assume. I have not gotten an MRI because my doctor was pretty much like, hey man, it's kind of like a rib injury. When it rains or when it's about to rain or it gets a little cold out, everything in my body starts hurting. And now a couple days ago, I told my wife, I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. It's like this.
And that right there is a very tough conversation. One thing to consider, you guys, is when you decide to start doing this sport, and where I don't think a lot of people have the determination is the wrong word. When people don't have the courage to not roll, you have to understand that you don't have to roll with other people. You can just go in there, learn the technique, and then leave. That's people forget about this, right? So he's about the same age I am, all right? And I've been training almost 15 years. Okay, it was 2009, I think it was. So I've got some time, right? I'm a black belt. Been training for years. Heaviest of guys and lightest of guys. The one thing that I will always do is I will always preface, hey, let's have fun and not go hard. Now, there's times where we're doing competition training where I know that's we're doing it, but I always, hey, no leg locks, no heel hooks. You know, like, it's okay to preface what you want out of a role and out of a partner. And you can decline. I have declined people, and I still have, like, some drama going on in another gym that I need to, like, squash up. But, like, I turned down the guy because I didn't want to roll with him because the dude's 200 pounds heavier than me. And, like, I was like, hey, man, maybe I'll go the next round with you. I need a break. And then I went back. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to roll. He's like, no, I'm cool. I need a break. All right. I try to do my best, but, like, I needed to save myself. I was tired. Back to my point, like, when we're exhausted and we're, you know, our energy's out, we're not really doing our bodies any favors by just, like, pushing it more. And that's the last thing I'll say, too, is when you're done, call it a day. Don't keep going just because you want to be there and it's addicting, because that makes no sense. Do what you need to do that you're there for. Learn the moves that you need to do, and then move on. You know, and then on top of that, the competition, you're only self-sabotaging yourself. Because what do you expect when you go so hard, so fast, so long? Your body's going to deteriorate. And another thing, too, is instead of taking these long, extensive times off, maybe give yourself, hey, I'm going to go for 3 weeks, and then I'm going to take a week off. And that's, I mean, I'm just saying this not to, like, toot my own horn. I'm saying this because I'm very glad for the decisions that I made. And again, like, I was teaching for a good 2 to 3 years. And I'm glad that I didn't, like, go hard all those times. I'm glad I just stopped and just watched and taught instead of going in there and have to prove a point. I'm glad that I took time off. I'm glad I took, you know, extra care of my leg when it did. Because I wouldn't want to be in this situation. I don't want you guys to be in this situation. You have nothing to prove and you have all this time. Why not have fun with it? Why not enjoy yourself? Create boundaries and limitations of yourself and your partner so that way you're not exceeding those and you're having a good time and you're not... Man, no one wants a sprained ankle. No one wants to have to deal with that stuff. It's tough.
Thing that I loved so much would say saved my life, even though it's this corny ass saying that a lot of people used to say, and they put it on t-shirts. It was like, Jiu Jitsu saved my life. Unless you are in the middle of a fight where someone is about to kill you and you use Jiu Jitsu to save your life, Jiu Jitsu doesn't save your life. But for me at least. It helped a lost 28-year-old who never really stuck with anything and never had much ambition and drive. It helped me find that in me. And in a weird way, I feel like I owe a lot of my success to the fact that I started training jiu-jitsu, because there's something about going in and just getting beat up day in and day out and sticking with it and not seeing a lot of progress for a while. Through that, it showed me that if I continued doing something, no matter how hard it was, and I stuck with it.
No wonder he's getting beat up. He's not even looking at his opponent. I'm just messing.
And I felt that I was good at jiu-jitsu. I still feel that I'm decent. As I get older, it gets harder. And now I train with some young guys.
You should have been worrying about that.
I can't even keep up with them. It's tough. It is a combat sport that you can't really fake the funk on. What led me to wanting to make this video was that a lot of people have asked about it, because I've mentioned jiu-jitsu throughout a lot of my videos, and I've, gave a lot of credit to jiu-jitsu for helping me get to where I'm at. While I do credit jiu-jitsu for quote unquote saving my life and giving me some direction when I was a lost 20-something-year-old and helping me understand what I know now from having grit and sticking it out when things get tough. And that helped me learn how to code, helped me with my YouTube channel. It helped me with a lot of things, just so many aspects of my life that I apply that same mentality to. This point, although it helped save my life, it's destroyed my body. And as I approach that big 4-0, as I approach that over the hill mark, I feel like I don't know if I can keep going, but I'm still doing it. I'm just one serious injury left in me before I decide to call it quits. I'm scared, man. I get anxious when I go to the gym, not because I'm going to get beat up. I've been getting beat up for the last 10 years, and I'm going to continue getting beat up as long as I continue going. I don't care about that. I don't have much ego. I put up good fights, but I like to train with good technique. I don't roll soft, but I'm also not an asshole on the mats. But I'm at the point where I do feel that it's a game of Russian roulette at this point. And it's only a matter of time before I step on those mats one day and my knee gives out again, or I dislocate something. And at this point in time, I don't feel like I want to continue putting myself through that. It does feel like my time is almost up. It does feel like I don't have that much left in me. I think it's one of those things that will always have a place in my heart and is a part of my life and was a part of my life for a long time. But I feel that it has given me enough that if I did part ways with it and stop training today, I feel that the impact that it had on my life will carry on through everything I do. And that's it. That's my jiu-jitsu video. I don't know if anyone will get value from this. I don't even know why I made this video, because people asked for it. And it is something that I enjoy doing. And it is something that I've done for a while. And it is one of those things that I can talk about forever. I don't know. I guess if you guys want to see more videos on jiu-jitsu, I'm happy to talk about it. But I feel like I pretty much said everything I had to say in this video about my jiu-jitsu journey.
Okay. I had to stop. We'll stop. Okay. I want to finish it with this. I want to finish with this. He already gave up. He's already given up. And that's okay. That's okay. If you guys are there and you want to quit, I totally understand. I totally understand. The problem that I have is that he is scared of something that he can prevent. And the prevention is exercise with weights, using mobility, and like again, you don't have to roll. And that's the thing that bothers me, is that when I set out to do something, I want to finish it. I want to complete it. Why am I here to do something half-ass and then say like I did it? Well, I didn't complete it. Like I just did it. I did the run. Yeah, but did you complete the marathon? No, I did like 10 kilometers. Well, that's good. No, totally respect. But if I'm going to do something when it's my life's journey, now I'm going to do it for the rest of my life because it's something that I love, like especially if it's healthy for you. And the biggest concern that I have for a lot of people out there is, why are you doing it? And when I hear him say these things, when I hear him talking about it, there's no direction. When he said, when I roll hard, but I'm not a jerk. See, to me that doesn't give me any direction. Like, see, when I roll, I roll because I want to discover new things. I want to see where my body goes. I want to see where my opponent goes. I want to see what the next thing is and what the next thing I discover is, who I'm going to meet, what I'm going to do. Okay, I have a little injury, but it's not going to be big because I'm not going to put myself in that predicament. And so this long rant and this whole thing is just be careful, be due diligent, and do what you want to do, but do it with integrity and finish it. Just like this video. Hope you have a good one. See ya.